Welcome, everyone. We have about 45 minutes to spend this evening, and I would like to get as much information to you as possible. So we are talking this evening with Chris Gilbert, who is a professional mediator, facilitator, conflict coach, ombudsman, which is a representative or an advocate, and an educator.
Wow, thank you, Marsha Gell. That's a lot of titles, but it all comes down to one thing. I am a hope provider. Because when people lose hope, that's when it's really bad and you're in trouble. So I try to make sure people have something to hang on to, which is hope. Our lives are just spiraling from all of the significant emotional events of this past year, present, and our uncertain futures. Conflict is nothing new. It's been around longer than we have. So in a short time together, I'm going to try and share some of the basics of conflict with you.
All right. So this is our agenda this evening. We'll be talking about what is conflict. Really, Chris will be sharing with us what is conflict, responses to conflict, neuroscience of conflict, the brain on conflict, and managing conflict. So Chris, let's start with what conflict is.
Yes, in every presentation and also in my classes that I teach you is ask the question, just to see where everyone is. And I ask that you jot down what you think conflict is and how it resonates with you when you see or when you hear the word conflict. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that.
Yep, you can drop in the chat what you think conflict is.
Well, in most cases, the words that I normally get or hear from people are mostly words that have a negative connotation. I get them all the time. And so we wonder if conflict is negative. Is it negative or bad? But actually, conflict is neither. It's neither bad or good, negative or positive. It just is. I see disagreements. And one positive word I see is change, which is good. That means someone has had some kind of conflict resolution skills added to their lives. But in most cases, you will see negative words to conflict. However, these are considered our responses to conflict. This is how we respond to conflict. And our bodies and our minds respond to conflict. It all depends on our life experiences, how we handle conflict growing up, how our families handle conflict. All of those are part of these negative responses to conflict.
All right, so could you tell us more about what the definition or the key elements that make a situation a conflict are?
Yes, so some people wonder why these words aren't exactly the definition for conflict, but there are definitions to conflict. So I revert to my friend Daniel Dana, who wrote a book on conflict, and he described conflict in 4 scenarios. The first scenario was there's times when we are challenged to make decisions or conscious decisions that affect our lives. And the struggle is real. However, this is not considered conflict. It's having good decision-making skills. Sometimes when we're trying to make decisions about major things, moving, a new job, buying a new home, buying a new car even, these things sometimes cause us internal conflict, but this is not conflict. And then there are times when we are maybe on the job that we are having a conversation with a coworker or friend or even a family member, and we're trying diligently to solve a problem. And we're communicating back and forth, the information is being shared, but we can't quite get to a decision because we don't have all the information that we need. And this is basically not a conflict. It's just having good problem solving skills. A lot of these things we aren't taught. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to try to say that it's conflict when it's basically just we need problem solving skills. And the third scenario that Daniel uses is a single person by yourself, and you're having stressful situation where you're trying to get something done and you can't because of the outside distractions that may occur. This is not conflict either. And even stresses from a loss or from a change in your family structure, and even sometimes mental health issues may cause this stress to arise. But this is basically having good stress management. If we have learned how to manage our stress by taking a moment to calm ourselves, it would not lead to a conflict. However, all three of these could virtually lead to a conflict once they cross the line. And in the last scenario that Daniel gives us, it's about two coworkers that are trying to get work done together. One loves to kind of pace around and, talk to himself, and the other one likes peace and quiet. And so there's a conflict there because one wants one thing to happen and one wants another thing to happen. And that then leads into name calling, innuendos, behavior issues that are coming up. All of these things are part of what conflict is. And so Daniel breaks it down to 4 major things that are the definition for conflict. 4 major things that need to be in place when there's conflict. And so these 4 things are, the first one is they're interdependent. That means whenever we're in conflict with someone, we need something from each other. And as I mentioned in the scenario, one person needed to pace around to think, the other person needed peace and quiet to think. And so there was a clash of conflict. And so the second thing is that they blame each other. And that's what happened in that particular scenario. They start to blame each other. The third thing is, after the name calling starts, anger. Anger has to be in place for there to be a conflict. And then that leads to our behavior causing a problem. So all 4 of those things are the causes of conflict. Mm-hmm. Independent, blaming each other, they're angry, and their behavior is actually causing a conflict.
Okay, so what happens when we overcome conflict or move away from unproductive conflict?
Yeah, getting away from conflict, we need to get away from conflict. So once we get away from conflict, it frees our minds to think about whatever we want. Without conflict, you are more attentive, you're aware, you're capable of meeting your goals. You can be compassionate towards others without having to vie for self-preservation. You can look at the world with wonderment and appetite for learning new things. These gems of charisma, warmth, power, and presence are traits that naturally exist in you, in everyone. When conflict isn't distracting us. Authenticity is easy when we aren't engaged in continuous fight about who you want to portray in this world. And that's normally what happens is we're putting on a facade or trying to portray something to the world. And without conflict, though, your thoughts and feelings are perfectly acceptable to share publicly without censorship. To escape conflict, you must go through a hero's journey of your own. This takes a change within yourself. This is your call. You need to deny, reject, turn back, and get it out of your system. Some kind of way with relaxing, trying to find something that can help you with your stress management and your decision making and all of those things. It's time for you to see what the world looks like when you aren't consumed with conflict.
So what is your understanding of the neuroscience, or what can you tell us about the neuroscience behind conflict?
Yes, the perspective on neuroscience is that the neuroscience or biological perspective is about the way that a person is, just is. And so instead of believing that external factors help us shape an individual, this perspective instead believes that the internal aspects of an individual are more important than their actions. And so the brain's function is basically for us to preserve, to emote, or act out how our behavior responds, and also our thinking. Those are the four things that are the basics for our brain function. And so there are three areas of our brain. There are three areas. And the first area is the reptilian brain. That's the regulation of our unconscious body functions, such as our breathing, our heart rate, our digestion, and our circulation. And it also is our behaviors that are related to this part of our brain are for self-preservation, our eating, defending our bodies, and also defending for our food source. And everybody knows that when we went into the pandemic last year, everybody was rushing to the grocery store and just cleaning off the shelves. That was that reptilian brain telling us we need to preserve as much as we possibly can to move on. The next portion of the brain is the mammalian brain. And it's involved with our consciousness, our thoughts, our memory, and our emotions, how we respond. And it also triggers our fight, flight, and freeze responses. And it's also involved with our social connections, how we connect with people. And then that third portion is the neocortex. And what's involved in the neocortex is our sensory perception, our motor commands, our spatial reasoning, and also our language. It also involves our conscious thought, including conscious interpretation of our emotional state.
Can we talk a little bit about our emotions during conflict?
Yes, what happens is as a conflict resolver, when we folks who touch people, like our doctors and our psychotherapists, we work with individuals who are experiencing conflict. And whether it's with the self, others, or tangibles, we're quick to find clarity to get them to the root of the problem. And so the psychology of people is such that emotions will be impacted almost instantaneously. Emotions sit at the surface and appear first, specifically when a fight or flight conflict arises. The reaction in our brain resides in the amygdala, located near the hippocampus of the frontal temporal lobe in the brain. And so at the initial moment of conflict, our brain cortisol levels release instantaneously, causing us to overreact in 0 to 60 seconds. And so anger builds up quickly while blood rushes to our brains. And how many of you can feel blood rising in your body and feel that hot anger? When we're in conflict, it's mostly all in our physical bodies. It's, we feel the sweaty hands, the palpitation of our hearts. All of those things are happening at that time. And so these are the physiological reactions when an individual is experiencing conflict. The reaction happens so quickly that the brain becomes stressed. And when the brain is under stress, stress can last longer in us than expected, and it impacts the hippocampus, reducing our cognition, resulting in brain fog. And in brain fog, it refers to the inability to think rationally and usually occurs when we're in conflict. Over time, anger, stress, and other negative emotions, if not dealt with, will impact the ability to learn and remember new information. Memory loss becomes a norm.
So in times of conflict, why can't we always see eye to eye?
Because we're all in our emotion. We're not thinking about how to resolve a conflict. And so as a conflict resolver, that is part of my job, is to get people out of that emotional state and into cognition. And the way I do that is I ask a question. What's going on with you right now? How does that make you feel? Because I want them to feel the emotions. I want them to get the emotions out, but then they have to actually think about what's going on with them. And then I ask them, so what do you think about that? Once they've described those feelings, just like in the beginning, I asked, what is conflict? And everybody said their responses, what their responses to conflict was. I try to get them to now that you know how you're feeling, why are you feeling that way? And so once they get into cognition, they start thinking about ways of managing or changing or addressing the conflict.
Mhm. Okay. Can you talk about the prefrontal cortex in conflict?
Yes, the prefrontal cortex, for all its sophistication, is not always right. It will consider input from many other areas of the brain and pull it into that coherent understanding. And that's what happens with the question. However, if there's not sufficient information, it will use what it has and drag in other material. And you will not always know what it drags in. And what it drags in is all of those life experience, all of those treasures is what I call them, because we get a lot of treasures and we have these little treasure boxes that we just store it all up in. Things from our parents, our families, our preachers, our teachers, all of these things that we have in this box that we pull from when we're in conflict. But there comes a time when we need to go and look in that box and we need to clean it out. We need to take out a little selfishness, a little self-doubt, a little discomfort. We need to take some of those things out of the box and leave the things that we need that will actually move us toward resolving conflict.
So that can explain sometimes why we have these different perspectives in the midst of conflict, because our brains are trying to reason from our perspectives and other people are reasoning from their perspectives. So, we can have a clash there.
Absolutely. And what happens when people are in conflict? You have two people butting heads or their fists together. And so long as that tension is there, you've got conflict. But what happens if one person moves away? Where's that other one going to go? And so that's how you try to handle conflict, is you either stop and think about, what is my role in this conflict? If your answer is none, then you have the ability to let that other person know that you choose not to engage in their conflict because it's not yours.
There was one thing I wanted you to comment on in terms of the brain during conflict. A little bit more about that.
Conflict is, it was around long before the neocortex was developed. And what happens is, back in our prehistoric days, if something came at you and wanted to eat you, you wanted to try to get away from it as quickly as you possibly can. And so the brain had to work fast in order to survive and not be bogged down in careful analysis of a lot of novel information. So the process had to be pre-conscious and fast, and I'm talking really fast. And so how we react to conflict impacts our health physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so while we are easily able to help others by being an outside or a third party neutral, taking care of our health, body, and mind is vital to being able to work with other people. So over the years, I've had to use a lot of the skills that I learned to just kind of keep myself in order to help other people. And what I found in the field of conflict resolution was that it is a lot of conflict because a lot of people have not actually dealt with their own stuff, with their own conflicts. And so once a conflict resolver or any health professional decides to take care of themselves, then they're able to better help other people.
And how do we typically react to conflict? Because we see the reactions. We definitely know what that looks like. What can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. As an organizational health specialist or an individual who works with people, it's difficult to sometimes take time to relate to people and find the root cause of the problem. But understanding how our brain is impacted during conflict is vital in helping people find their path to conflict resolution. There's two pathways to a reaction that occur in the amygdala: confront the entity, which is the fight, or to just shut down, which is the flight. And so the reaction is rapid initially, and we become startled immediately. It is only afterward that we digest the event. Recently, research has discovered that the message received in the thalamus is transferred directly to the amygdala without routing through the cortex, causing a rapid reaction of our brain's natural system. And so the thalamus in our brain receives the emotional stimuli from a message. And when I say our emotions actually sit at the surface, they are received in the sensory thalamus. And so our reaction, the initial sting is felt, and the reaction results in the amygdala. The amygdala then is hijacked, forcing us to become disoriented or in a heated event. And then the heat of the conflict affects our neural pathways located in the prefrontal cortex, which shuts down immediately, depriving us from taking information in a coherent format. And while establishing a perception of what other individuals said and trapping ourselves in the I'm right, you're wrong mindset.
That's definitely something I know we've all witnessed, that kind of I'm right, I'm wrong, and you're not able to really hear what someone's saying to reason. Okay, wait, let me take a step back and really understand what's going on. So how can we try to manage our emotions during conflict? Because that's a big part of why we can't always hear what someone else is saying.
Absolutely. As I mentioned at the beginning in our introduction, my profession is surrounded by conflict and dispute resolution. And so I assist individuals in the workplace, in faith-based arenas, academic and community, with doing group facilitations, family conflicts. I help out through mediation, in facilitation and conflict coaching. And so you're welcome to reach out to our 3-1 Health and Wellness team for my contact information, but anyone on our team can assist. We have psychotherapists, we have physicians like yourself, and we have holistic doctors like Dr. Frank that could assist with those kinds of things. But in managing our conflict, it may not lead to having to reach out to any of these professions at the time, but just having that opportunity to take some time to understand what is pushing your buttons, what's causing that conflict to occur is important. And then calming ourselves to really start thinking about what are some ways to resolve the conflict. And so conflict management takes an effort on our part, and sometimes we must make a conscious decision. The greatest gift that we've all been given is the gift of choice. And so by taking a chance to make a choice to change is the first and most important step in the right direction. There's nothing wrong with seeking professional help to get you started in changing that negative response to conflict. Seeing a conflict coach is just as important as drinking your daily dose of water. Conflict coaching can help decipher emotions potentially caused by brain fog or underlying emotions that the turmoil has caused us in the conflict, and helping us actually get to the root of the issue. Everyday conflict on the job can result in undue stress on your mind, your body, creating an unhealthy atmosphere for you and your family and your coworkers. But don't lose your passion. Don't lose your passion for what you want to do. You're important to your success or to the success of your team and your family. And so by reaching out to a conflict coach or a mediator like myself, we can recommend strategies on how to resolve issues, providing any type of constructive self-improvement processes every step of the way. So I'm here to assist in any way I possibly can. But the important thing is to turn those negatives into positives. Turn it into positive behavior and thoughts. Taking a breath and calming yourself. Walk away from the situation if you need to calm your emotions. And sometimes being physically present or in front of the individual or the actual situation can continue to stir our emotions negatively to the point of escalation, resulting in verbal abuse or physical abuse sometimes. The other thing is you can think it through. Remember, get out of the feelings and into cognition and start thinking about it. Tap into that second part of your brain and think about the situation. Take time to think through what you said, what you thought, and how you came off in that particular conflict and what you could have done better. And when you find out what you could have done better, do better. It takes approximately 48 to 72 hours to get over a conflict. And so it is at this point that we can actually realize what we did wrong in the conflict and do better the next time. The other thing is be better the next time. Conflict is inevitable, so we can't predict when it's going to happen, but we need to be ready for when it does. And try to just be calm. The next time you find yourself in conflict, lower your voice, communicate with diplomacy, and think about the other person and what they're hearing that's coming from you. Train yourself to be mindful. You don't want to become the monster in the conflict. Train yourself to control your emotions so that you are not adding undue stress to yourself or hurting others. Hurt people hurt people. So remember that. Remember, only you can allow people or anyone to hurt you. And so practice your self-discipline. Self-care is important, as well as trying to relax and using other modalities like meditation, spa treatments, just even taking a walk and spending more time with your families. So those are some tips that you can use in managing conflict. And I hope just a few of this information that I've given you, some of it was high level, but for the most part, it's just basically getting to know who you are and whose you are.
That I have found